Let's tear down this Tascam Porta O2 Mark II. Maybe there's something in here that needs deep cleaned or soldered, or you need to do some kind of electrical troubleshooting. Maybe you just need to change belts. I'll cover everything you need to do to totally disassemble this and get any access that you need. Taking off these knobs is unnecessary unless you're actually going to remove the mixer, but since I am going to do this, that's the first thing that I will do. So I'm using this plastic tool for taking out upholstery of a car. I think it's called a spudger. You can also use these sort of tools that you get with kits for changing the screen on a mobile phone. Or just your fingers, but sometimes they're a bit stiff. That's where a tool like this can be handy. So you'll notice that the pan controls are grey, the phone's level and the track levels are orange, and the gain trims are red. And these, I would call them faders, but they're not really track faders. They're like fine-tuned for the gain for the two channels, but they're this orange decaled fader type. These record function switches are fitted from the back. We could take off this mono stereo switch for the headphone socket just now. Flipping it over, with heavier units I would suggest putting this onto a bit of foam to protect the front face, but actually I've already removed 1, 2, 3 screws from these holes, so I'm not going to be putting any pressure on it, and it's a light unit. But the screws that come out of it are like this, a little over 2 centimeters long, with maybe about 15mm of that having this wide ferrule screw that goes into plastic. Your standard domestic size of Phillips head screwdriver goes into them. So you'll have 3 of those. And then they're kind of little plastic clips here and hinges along the front there, so you may need to push to get that open. These are the 2 clips that I mean here and here. And then tip that forward that way because you're going to have all these cables connecting the 2 halves. I'm going to focus on getting the transport out first because although you can change this belt here for the mechanical counter from the front, we need access to the back to do the rest of the belt change. We're going to disconnect the cables first. The erase head joins at this socket here, and then the record playback head, which is this one, branches off to 4 colour coded headers. Since these wires going into here are pretty delicate, I'm going to try and grab the plastic header rather than putting any strain on the wires. That's one way you could do it with pliers. I think we can probably pry them up slightly with a flathead screwdriver as well. So I'm using a certain amount of force, but it's going into the plastic and not the cables. I believe that these are tucked under these little ceramic capacitors. You want to do that just to keep everything flush. Then this header here, it's got all the array signals in it. Just separate that. You see where that split is? Separate that way. Then the power for the motor and any leaf switches that are sensing what mode it's in are all connected via this header here. It might actually be easier to remove that once the screws are taken off, but I'll give it a go. There we go, that's out. Now we can disconnect this from the plastic base. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws. This one here, top left, you can see that the earth connection for the motor is joining at that corner. It can be a good idea as you're disassembling something like this to get a permanent marker, Sharpie, something like that, and make little notes to yourself on the metal, and that can be wiped away afterwards with isopropyl. You can use the sort of swabs that they use for injections at the doctor's or a tattoo studio. I'm just going by memory in this instance because it's quite a simple unit I should remember. Then at this corner we've got a cable tidy to keep all these cables from pressing up against the upper plastic case, I guess. But you can also see that there's another common ground connector, this little ring connector here, that's running to the base of the record playback head to make sure that that's connected to common ground, otherwise you'll get a buzz. If you hear a buzz when you reassemble this, check that this is connected. Sometimes you'll get a buzz in the system because you've forgotten to reattach one of these. The other 3 screws, there's no ring connectors there, they just go into the plastic mounting posts. And the screws that are coming out look like this. They're about 1 centimetre in length. They've got a wide ferrule going all the way up the length of the shaft. I'm using the same size of screwdriver. At that point the transport will lift out. So you can see that there are another 2 additional belts. One that's going from the capstan motor to the flywheel. And then there's another belt that runs from underneath the flywheel and a slot in there that goes around this wheel here, and that's giving you all the rotation here of the reels, depending on which mechanical mode you put it into. It's not dissimilar overall to the transport that's in the 414 Mark II. I've done a video about that where I went into more detail about belt sizes, but actually I found you can get a multi-pack of square section belts like that will include loads of sizes, but all 3 that you need. I've bought those from AliExpress, eBay, these kind of places with success. Moving on, let's disconnect the 2 halves of this unit. So I've got the upper part over here. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 headers in this. These cables look sturdier, so I'm just going to pull them out. And you can tell by the number of pins in each header and the length of the cables where they're going to go back. This printed circuit board is screwed down to the chassis, so let's remove the screws. There's one here, one here. There's one in the centre here, just below and to the left of this SIP chip. Now I seem to remember there was one here in this top corner just to the right of the power input jack. I've maybe forgotten to replace that. I have been inside here already, and I think actually that one may have a hole in it as well, so check those 2 holes when you open yours. At that point, if you pull back on these 2 plastic clips here, you can see there's little protrusions on this printed circuit board that are going into these clips. That should tip that way. There's another clip here. See that protrusion on the board fits into this housing here. Also your power socket and your power switch need to fit into these recesses on the case. You can see there's shielding underneath there. It's pretty obvious from the pattern of the plastic standoffs where that goes. And that would give you the access that you needed to do any soldering. You can see on this one actually I've done an almost full recap. We've got these Tetrakan caps in there, so yours will look black if you've got the factory capacitors in there. Moving on to the upper part. First thing we want to remove is this little daughter board that has the guitar input in it. You can see there's a little network with 1 transistor and some capacitors and resistors, and I guess that it's just to provide a slightly different impedance for this input. I'm a little confused about the screw sizes here. By the way, all the screws that we removed from the printed circuit board are the same 1 centimeter size as we removed from the transport, and you're going to find all of these screws are the same size, except these seem to have a different ferrule width to screw into metal. So what I suggest you do, I would unscrew these and immediately put them back into that metal housing so you don't get them mixed up with the other ones, like so. That can just dangle off to the side for now. First one of these screws that we will remove is up here on this piece of cardboard. So I assume there's some sort of shielding issue where some of these contacts can short out against the board opposite when it's shut. You can see in this case that faintly I've drawn with blue Sharpie the outline of that board to remind myself that it goes there, and I think that's his card shield in terrible handwriting across there as well. By the way, if you're not seeing these, don't worry about it. This is just a repair I did because this particular printed circuit board was damaged. Here on the top left you can see that the shielding that's underneath here, we'll see that in a minute, is connected to common ground via this ring connector in the top left. So after removing that, you may want to leave some sort of marking to yourself on the board to remind yourself that that goes back there. And we'll just do these in rows from left to right. One here. You can see here that I've put a red cross through these ones because they're pass-through holes for the plastic case to shut. Remember that there are 3 holes here that keep the 2 parts of the plastic case together. So the next one that we need to remove is here in the centre. And then there's another one further down. finally we've got the 3 along the bottom here. Now, these sockets are mounted to the board, so you're going to have to tip it up this way so that these sockets come out of these holes. The board will look like that. You could remove those switch caps if you wanted to get in here to do a more thorough clean of those switches. In the description I will put some links to videos I've made about cleaning a mixer. It's demonstrated on another model of Tascam, but the principles are going to be the same. You see we've got shielding, silver side down. That's pretty obvious from the layout of the holes. If this dust guard thing comes out, bear in mind that that should go down first and then the shielding. Should you need to clean or repair or buff up the plastic door, there's just one screw here. This little leaf spring will be placed so that that V tick shape is pointing down the way, like so. You can see there's 2 little plastic pegs in that mounting, and at that point this side will come out, push a little bit in this arm, so a little peg here comes out of that hole, and then you can just tap it like that. I know that's out of focus, but you get the idea. And at that point it's completely disassembled. So yeah, that's definitely the most simple of the Tascam Porta Studios to disassemble.